Hi, Ev.
Hi. Hi.
So good to meet you in person, finally,
Yeah.
from across the world. We've been in this like tools for thought and productivity software online community together for a while, but a little while ago, like a month ago or so, I guess month and a half now, you started using Tana. And
Yep.
it's clear you've been having a lot of fun with that. So, I mean, why don't we start maybe by just like you giving a little bit of an intro, telling us a bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name's Ev, and I have been kind of bumping around this whole space maybe for about 2 years. I during the pandemic, I discovered Notion, and that kind of got me back into this whole world of uh apps, productivity, PKM. I don't even know what to actually call it anymore. But and so that's kind of how I started, and I just started writing my experiences,
Hmm.
which is what I normally do. And so now that's a big part of what I do online is I create content and I write about things, and I get to have a lot of fun playing with different apps and things like that. And I think for me, it's all about trying to like organize and make sense of kind of all this information that we have. That's really at the very core of it, what I'm trying to do every day and help people do.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. And it seems to me, just from some of the screenshots and such that you've been posting, that you have like a day job,
I
too.
do. Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about that? Has Tana been
Yeah.
helpful for that as well?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I do yeah, I am a creator on the side, and then during the day I'm a marketer. So I actually have I'm a part of a company where we help health and fitness professionals market their business. So we have educational programs, and I do a lot of coaching and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of what I do most of the day.
Uh-huh.
And I have a team who does who I work alongside with, and we do that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Just wanted to cover that because
Yes.
Um, I think that it can be a common misconception when you see like people posting content online about how to use a software that like that's all they do and that it's
Yeah.
like productivity for productivity software's sake. And the same thing happened with me a while
Yes.
ago, where basically like I think what happens with a lot of creators is that they have their day job and they can't talk about as much of that publicly. So they talk about the other stuff. They talk about the
That's
meta
it.
work and the softwares that they use. And for people like us, like this software is just a lot of fun. It's like almost a hobby alongside
Yes.
something that powers all of our work, and enables us to be as effective as we are in our day job. So I just wanted to like ground expectations that like the stuff that you've been showing in kind of like is are things that have evolved from your own usage and from the usage patterns you've seen from other people.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, I think it's such a good point because I mean, it's very weird to be a creator who talks about
Mhm.
creating. It's a bit of a weird vortex to be in. And so when you look at it from the outside, it can kind of seem like what do you, sometimes even I ask myself, like, what even do I talk about? But yes, like, and I think that's why I have a lot of people ask me, oh, why don't you quit your job and do that? But I actually think it keeps you sharper to have a day job and to be, doing other things rather than just like get into this whole like creator world and that's all you do
Mhm.
and then becomes a bit weird, I think.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Totally. So another piece of context too is that you have a course. What do you call the course?
Tana fast track.
On a fast track. And this course, yeah, can you describe the goal of this course?
Yeah, I do know I didn't really intend to create a Tana course, and certainly not this early
Right.
in the game. And
Mhm.
then I had a couple of people come into my DMs and be like, I've stuffed around for a week, 2 weeks. I just want whatever you have in my Tana. And so I was like, oh, probably make that happen. And so that's kind of, that is the goal. It's really, you know, I think I really want to help people get up and running really fast and learn how to use it while they're actually doing real world things. I think like you can learn about the features of something, but not really know how to implement that, or like really like, why does that matter? Like yesterday, I think I put a video out about tabs in Tana. And it's like, well, yes, I know how to use tabs, but like, here's actually how they're useful. So like taking a feature and saying, this is how it's useful. And so I think for me, that's exactly what it is. It's like 5 different use cases where you might use it for work, for PKM, for a couple of other different things. And you're learning about how to use Tana while you're setting it up. And so it's a nice little kind of marriage of the two of those things.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the most successful users of Tana will get started with like projects, like with actual things they're trying to do. They're not just trying to and I don't mean started with project management. I mean like started with like some goal, something that they're trying to do and just like work on for a bit. So given that you have a course on this that helps beginners, I'm going to ask you some questions about your experience like teaching those beginners, some patterns that you've noticed, some that might help me out as a product manager as well. And yeah, so I guess like one question would be, what are the biggest stumbling blocks you notice beginners running into?
I think especially if they're not used to kind of this block outliner day page kind of mode, I think that there's this whole idea of like, where do I put this thing? Because if you're coming over from somewhere like Notion or somewhere where it's very structured, you're thinking, can I really just put this here? And it goes to wherever it needs to go. So there is that mentality. I think there's also the mentality of like, my day page is super messy, or my library's messy, or my schema's messy. Like, does that matter? Do I have to keep it clean? So there's a bit of anxiety around like tidiness in that. And then I think just generally thinking through, like you was talking about projects before, and it's really like, you know, like you've got this blank canvas and you're like, what am I supposed to be doing with this? Like, and so really trying to think through the structure, or like, can I really just have a tag? Do I need other things? So it's thinking through like, how do I need to, like how can I solve this problem? And there's probably a few different ways to do that because it's such a flexible software. So there's that.
So could you maybe like show us a little bit?
Yeah.
Like visualize to me like how you use the daily node, how you use the home node, the library, your schema.
Absolutely. Okay, so I keep a pretty one of the things I love about Tana is I can have a lot of fields but hidden, and that is honestly one of my favorite features, because I think then it gives you the option to use the field without having to feel like, oh, I've got all these things I need to fill out. So basically when I start a kind of a day page, it's pretty blank, and the only thing that I feel I need to do is I like to fill in my daily log. So I use text expander, so I just have a little I just use a quick little text expander snippet that puts the time in, and then I can write something in. So like filming with Rob. And I just kind of throughout the whole day, just jot things down. I use the daily log as a little bit of a journal, just like if I need to rant about something, if I need to work something out, if I'm blocked on something. So I'm always kind of got my daily log ready and ready to go. The other 2 things that I use on a pretty like most days is my daily schedule. So I can click it and it appears, and then I can put any meetings in. I haven't planned my day today, which is bad of me, but I can just add my meeting tag. And then there's a few things happening here, which is basically I've built the title from different fields. So I can open up the meeting. Oops, and I can put in, what it is. So we could put this here, filming Rob at, for me, it's 7:30. And then I've got some default content. So if I want to add some agenda items, some actions, some notes from the meeting, and I love this. I use it. I pretty much fill my morning. Like in the morning, I put all my meetings in, and then I can work from that throughout the day, which is really nice. So like I really only have to come to my daily page, and I think one of my kind of concepts is like I have like, if I come over here, I've got my focus hub, which is basically where this is where I keep projects. It's where I kind of organize my week. So kind of organize like what's on each day. But I only look at this pretty much once a week. And then in the day, I can be really present. So as long as I've kind of set myself up, done a bit of a weekly review and a weekly plan, then I can just be in the day and know that I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing that day. And I'm not like thinking, oh no, like what are the other tasks? Or I'm not jumping around. Like I just feel like everything's just here and I can just like work really in like kind of in flow really. So yeah, that's probably one of the things I really love. And then the only other thing I have that I put in regularly is to do today. And so I've got some searches set up. So I obviously have 2 different kinds of tasks that I work on. So I like to separate them. And I like to do fun things. So like this is just a live query of all of the tasks that are not done. And then each day I just come in and I say what day it is. So today is it's Wednesday for me. And then I run and I press done. There's nothing to do today because I've got a day of coaching calls, so I don't schedule tasks. But I like that. And then if I schedule too many things on, then I have this kind of node where I can put things to say, you're kidding yourself if you think you're going to get these things done, but you can put them here just in case. So I kind of use my daily page in a bit of a fun way, like just to kind of like make a bit of fun of myself and kind of not be so serious all the time, basically.
And what about like how does your library interact with this?
Okay, my library, I never go to the library.
Okay.
To be honest, this is what the library looks like. So sometimes, so I do sometimes feel like, oh, my daily page is really messy, and sometimes I'll just move things over there to the library just to kind of get them away. But my thinking is like, really, for me, it doesn't really matter where anything goes. I know that if it's tagged, it's going to go to the right place because I've got searches set up and I've got kind of my hubs along the side here. So for me, if it's on the daily page, it's fine. If it's in the library, it's fine. And I'm kind of okay with the mess. But I understand not everyone is. So
yeah, that makes sense. So you don't feel any need to like organize the library, which I think is fine. But I'm curious like about when you said that sometimes you decide to move things from the daily page to the library. Can you elaborate on like when you do that?
Yeah, that's great. Because so if I deliberately, like if I'm working in the day and I put things on my daily page, I don't move them, right? But a lot of the times I'll be in a live search, for instance. So like, for instance, on any of my projects, let's say I add a new task here. So when I add a new task and I'm not on the daily page, it adds to the daily page. And so if I come here, I've got that new task. So if I'm adding a lot of nodes to a search and they kind of start to clutter the page, then some days I'll move them. I don't have a really great reason for moving or not moving. Like for me, and honestly, I don't look back at my daily page at all. So it's for me, it's just not for me, it's not an issue at all.
You said that to you, you don't really care where a node is, because as long as it's tagged and has whatever metadata you want, it will
Yep.
show up in the right places. Can you like help the viewer like understand what's meant by that, and like
Yes.
why you
Yeah.
don't need to care where a node
Yeah.
is?
I think so, and I think this comes down to understanding between like super tags and then searches. So basically, I mean, it was really just basically capturing and then finding things again. So if I can capture something and tag it with a super tag, every time that I create a super tag, I think, well, how do I need to find this information again? And then that ends up being a search somewhere. So, and I think it's fantastic now. You can create, whenever you create a new super tag in the sidebar, it comes up with that prompt to create a new search. Because I think that that is a bit of anxiety for people. It's like, really, if I tag this, like one of my friends, like, I'm crap at tagging. I'm like, no, you'll be fine. Like everything, you just tag everything. But I think if you think of it like you create your super tag, and then you have to create a place to find that again. So for me, a lot of that comes down into these hubs, for instance. So the focus hub is where I do all my like projects and tasks. And so all of these tabs here are basically nodes that are searches. So this node at the top is a search. Oh, wait, is it a search? Oh, yeah, it's down here. Sorry, I got confused then. So down here, you can see this is just searching for any project. Okay, so if I tag something project in my day page or in any page or in any node, sorry, I call it page. I said this to Danny Hatcher the other day. I keep calling things pages. But so if I know that if I tag anything project com, then it's going to show up here because I've set up this search. And the same for this up next. This is another live query. So it searches for anything that is a task and that's not done. And then it just shows up in kind of a different view. Okay. So any and so I start to think through basically, okay, once I capture something, and the way I capture anything is with a super tag, then I think about what are all the different ways that I need to find that information and then view it in all sorts of different ways. And that's kind of my mode of working, like capture, and then I might want to look at like these two searches are exactly the same, up next and this week, except they're viewed. This is viewed or grouped by the day it needs to be done on. And this is just viewed by the status of that. So is it available or is it up next? Which is kind of how I work on like what I need to do next. So I kind of that's really how I kind of maybe the three layers of how I think about things is capture, and then find, and then like how do you need to find that in different ways and in the different modes that you work in.
Right.
Yeah, and I find that's been a good way to think about it, because the other thing that I come up against with some of my students is like, oh, I'm doubling up on information, or I'm doubling up on views. And I don't necessarily see that. I see it as like, if I need to see information this way and be able to move this across, I can easily do that. But then if I need to see and plan my week, I can view that exact same information. It's not, to me, it's not doubling up. To me, it's just a different focus mode, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that's super important as like a general benefit of Tana for people to grasp, which is just that you can write your nodes anywhere in your overall Tana outline, right? It doesn't matter where you write it. And then with these live searches and with the different views that you can have on them, the different filters, grouping, sorting, etc., you can create you create structure in the format that you need it when you need it, right? Like you write a live search for the particular structure that's helpful to you in that moment. and you
Yep.
can kind of like construct this from anything, right? Like I
Yeah.
bet a lot of these, a lot of your queries are probably going to just be like a search for a tag
Yeah.
with some special filters, right? But like you can also say, hey, what are all of the things that have a status, and then also like as a field, and then you can
That's it.
create a search from that if for some reason you need to see all things as opposed to just like a task that has a status or
Yep.
a publishing piece that has a status, right? Like you construct this stuff as needed.
That's right. Yeah. And I think what I love most about it is it's actually just really simple to create a search. Like,
Hmm.
it's like if I set this up in other apps, it feels hard and permanent. And like some of these, these hubs that I have set up feel very permanent. But the other day I just need to find a whole lot of things. And I just searched, and I just created a
Right.
search and then found what I needed, and then that's it. And
Yeah.
doesn't feel it just feels really like in flow in the moment. Like you're like, oh
Mhm.
yeah, I just need to find all those tags. Let's
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. I do the
Mm.
same sort of thing where I'll just create a search and then delete it after I found what I
Yes.
needed, right?
I know,
Like
right?
if I'm logging a feature request from a user and I'm like, I think I might have seen this one before, then I'll just write a live search for all nodes tagged with feature requests
Yeah.
with related feature, like one of the items that feels most relevant, and
Yes.
then it'll show me all those things, and then I might see like, oh, this one actually is the same, and then I'll just reference that on our daily node.
Yeah.
Right? And
That's it.
same, or if I don't find anything, then I'm like, great, here's the new one, let me delete this search. Like it's very low friction.
It is, yeah. And I think it doesn't feel permanent. You don't have to feel like you have to keep it. You can just find what you need, delete it.
How would you say this is different from the databases that you might see in Notion? Because I know that you have a lot of background in Notion. Like, how does this
Yeah.
feel uh, different to a Notion user coming to Tana?
I feel like advanced features in Notion are just normal features in Tana. Like a lot of people that I talk to, when we're talking like building Notion things, stay away from databases, or they have really simple databases.
Mhm.
There's not linking, there's not relations, there's not, these different views, that kind of thing. Like they're just using it very simply. Whereas I feel like in Tana, it's just so normal, and it doesn't feel like a database. Like it feels like a node, and you're just like giving it some loose structure. But actually,
Mhm.
that loose structure is really structured. Like, and you can do so much with it. And so I feel that. But then also you've got this whole lot of friction with people who use something like Notion, where you're in one place and then you're like, oh, I've got this idea for another thing, and I've got to click to that place, put that in, do that. And that's how, I think that's how I ended up kind of, migrating over to Rome, because I'm over here, and I'm a pretty structured person, but the clicking and the this and the that. And then once I understood Rome, I don't know, something happened to my brain, and I was like, oh, flow. Like this is
Mhm.
just crazy. And so I think that then being able to have those two things together, where you can find that flow and you can put things anywhere, and you can, really just dump things in, create structure. It really does, I think, create a whole lot of flow for people. And I think people from Notion will be surprised coming over, at how nice it is.
Yeah, there's just so much more flexibility. Like one thing also about Notion, right, is that like each of your database rows, they can only really live in one database at a
Yes.
time. So you have the same problem that you have with files and folders systems where you need to decide where something goes before you even write it down.
Yes.
Um, Whereas in Tana, like you can just write a node, like you could write it in your daily node, you could write it in your library, in your home node. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
As long as you have it, because the databases in Notion are things that you create ahead of time. You decide like what columns to put in it, and then you create all these, and then you add data to the database, and then you create different
Yeah.
views. Whereas in Tana, it's like you just create the nodes, you maybe add tags to it, maybe add fields to it, and then you create the table views come after the fact, after
They
you've
do.
already written down the data, and they go to any table you want.
I think so, yeah. And I think you're right about that, that there is this inflexibility in, especially in, well, in any kind of database, like even like Notion, that that thing is one thing. It's not two things. It can't be two things. It can't be here and there. And so yeah, like, and I think that's why you like the super tags and like extending the super tags is really cool, because you and you can add as many super tags as you need, and it's that, you know, could be 5 different things in Tana. And yeah, it's like it starts with the node and then it's kind of builds up from the bottom,
Yeah.
whereas Notion kind of goes from the top down.
Can you show us how you've used extending super tags?
Like all of my content is what I call a spark idea. So whenever I have an idea for content, and I might not know what kind of content it is, and if I don't know what kind of content it is, I'll just give it the tag spark idea. But once I know what it is, then all of those things, whether it's a YouTube video, an article, an essay, then all of those things have things in common, like a published date, usually a brain dump, you know, an idea about the thing. But then they also have different things, right? So, for instance, like YouTube has a different kind of flow to if I was writing an article. So I need to add a few more things. You know, there's a thumbnail, and then there's editing, and, you know, all sorts of things. So I like that I can have kind of a Spark idea configuration, which basically it still has a lot of fields. So there's always a status to it. And I don't fill all these in. Like when I first have an idea, I usually just have a brain dump and it's parked. But then I can add a whole lot of other different things if it's a YouTube video, for instance. So if I can go here for a YouTube video, I also have like YouTube status. So brainstorming, it needs a script, it's ready to film, that kind of thing. I also can then keep like my YouTube script in here, a thumbnail and a headline, although the headline I realized probably can go back up into Spark Idea now. But that's what I love. I can just kind of like, oh yeah, that's probably going to be. So I think that how I think about the extending is that you have this top level super tag, which has things that are in common, that have all kind of fields and related data that's in common. And then you have these extender tags that then are the same thing, but they have different, they have other kinds of data that needs to be different. And that's something I struggled with in Notion, because you either have to have like lots of databases that relate together, or one database with a whole lot of fields that are irrelevant to one thing. And then so you end up with just way too many fields, and I think it just gets complicated. Whereas here it's nice. It's like, okay, top tag, and then you have all these kind of sub tags with different fields. Yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of the fields are like left as optional, so you don't even need to touch it. Like that was a big thing that stressed me out with Notion, and my Notion and Airtable attempts was just seeing all the empty columns, because there's so many times where it's like specific items need a different sort of property, different field to add to it. And what's nice about extending super tags as well is like, you could write a search for just the Spark idea tag, and it's going to pull up all your YouTube videos and all of your articles as well. And so that suddenly becomes a very easy query, as opposed to writing a query that says, okay, any of these, like, give me any of these 4 different tags, and you have to
Yeah.
write all of those down. Like now in Tana, it's kind of simple.
So simple. Yeah. And I love that. And I think also like these are obvious, they obviously both have the tags, but this one here, for instance, it still has it's a YouTube video, but will still have all of the kind of Spark idea um fields in it. So because a lot of people are like, oh, it looks really messy with all those tags, whereas I don't, you probably noticed by now I don't really care about messy,
Right.
but if you do like to keep it clean, you don't have to see all those tags, you just see the sub tag, and then that's the thing.
How do you use your home node?
The home node, I probably keep it kind of in sections. So if you have a look here, obviously there's the calendar. I have this groovy little thing that I set up, which is what I call my setup guide, which is just a bunch of searches for as I was learning, kind of in those first few weeks, I dumped a whole lot of things in. So I've got like all these little Tana tips that I learned in the Slack channel, or like if somebody said something, I was like, oh, I'm adding that in. So this ended up being really useful because I could just like I could look back on some of that. I have like just different things around like my setup, because sometimes I forget like the CSS things I set up, and then people ask me about it and I'm like, oh, I don't remember where that came from. So there's that. I had a lot of like stuff that I would log in the feedback channel and feature requests, things I still want to figure out. So I had like actually I figured out auto initialization. So this is like just a great way to actually learn the software. And now in Tana Fast Track, everyone has this same setup of the setup guide. And it really helps them to remember, oh yeah, that's a great tip, I'm going to put that in, or this is how I set my thing up. And it's just good to be able to look back on.
That
Sorry.
actually, just as a little detour,
Yeah.
that's super interesting, because one of my follow-up questions is, how did you learn Tana in such a short time? Like, it really seemed like you got started and then within 24 hours you were already like flying,
Yeah.
So how'd you pick it up so quickly?
I think I already had the paradigm of database from Notion, and then I had the paradigm of Rome. But I also think I set up my Rome pretty much like Tana. So I had tags for everything, and then I had searches to find those things. And so I pretty much was able to just go one for one and just be like, yep, okay, I've got all my super tags, I've got all my searches, I've got the way that I did that. And so I feel like, like it looks like, oh, she just gone like straight in. But I think I've built when you build systems over that time, you kind of already have what you need in your head, and so it was easy just to get in. But there was I mean, I use Slack like crazy. Those I was just like questions, and I think the community is just amazing. Like, and I don't think I would have got as far as I did without the community. I think that was a really big part. And it's a big part of, asking the question, or, getting feedback, how does this thing work? I don't understand this. So that was really good in kind of, and still is. I get so much value out of it. But I think bringing your existing structure to it will help in the beginning. And then I think just solving one problem. You said it before. It's like, if you can solve just one problem rather than trying to like put everything in, then that's going to be easier, because then you start to then understand how it works, and you think, oh, okay, I can copy this over to here. I can copy this kind of structure over to that structure. So yeah, but the setup guide definitely helped as well. It's all about it's like this is the whole thing, managing knowledge. It's like you can either like have this knowledge and then just kind of like let it flit away, or you can actually bring it in and kind of build that up so that it becomes something you can reference for, for a long time. Like it took me a while to get keyboard shortcuts, but I just kept going back into my setup guide and how did that work? Okay, like and you're just kind of training yourself, every time you come in.
If you're a person who has made serious migrations between apps before, I think that's kind of a skill that you
Yes.
can build up, right? Like um I remember when I first transitioned from Rome to Obsidian.
Yeah.
It took me like 2 weeks,
Yeah.
but then I was like, oh, if I'm using Obsidian for these things I was doing before in Rome, I can do the same workflows generally. It just might look different implementation wise because
Yes.
Obsidian's a different app that has its own set of idioms and ways of doing things like right,
Yep.
and then when I transitioned to Tana, right, like same sort of thing happened. I realized, oh, I can get all of my workflows from before and more, and
Yeah.
it just might look a little bit different implementation wise, but Tana has its own way of doing things that feels very special and handy. So it seems like you use your home node basically as an area that is like a hub for a bunch of different sets of live searches, right? So like
Yes.
each of those has indented underneath it like 3 to 5 different live searches displayed as tabs, and
Yes.
that kind of helps you just like more effectively access stuff.
I think so. And to be honest, I mean, this is 6 weeks in, I think.
Mm,
But like those first few days, it did not look as organized. I think the sidebar is
right.
where I'm most organized now in Tana. But it was just a whole bunch of different searches, and then I started grouping things together and thinking, okay, I really have like three main things that I do, which is like my work, what I do as a creator, and then I have my knowledge library kind of Zettelkasten type stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
then last weekend I built my meals hub as well, which kind of is just sitting there as a thing, but it's not really kind of in anything yet.
So you mentioned that when you migrated to Tana, you were coming from Rome and many of your systems were similar. So what were you most pleasantly surprised by? Why did it feel worthwhile to transition if you were doing similar workflows there?
There's I think two reasons. One, structured data. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
doing any kind of structured data in Rome except for like, I would use templates and things like that. So and I was still like there was some things I kept in Notion, some things I did in Rome. I did a lot of writing in Rome. But then I'd like to, keep like, be able to sort and search and do all that kind of thing. So I think that was a big friction point for me. But then honestly, the other part is the community side of things. And it was really, I feel hard to get excited about Rome in a
Right.
community kind of way. And I like that. That's part of the thing. I like to talk to other people about how are you using it? What are you doing? What are some interesting things here? And I just feel like that kind of was a bit lost. And it's disappointing. And I get a lot of that in the Notion community as well. They're evangelists for, for their thing, and they love it. And I think that makes a better product in the end. And I think it makes for better use cases. It makes for, it definitely makes my workspaces better. People give, ideas, and you kind of have this kind of swapping of knowledge. And I think all of that builds something better in the end.
What would you say, um, from your own experience, but also from what you've observed from the people taking your course that are migrating from Rome? What are the biggest mental model shifts that, like, what do they struggle to
Yeah.
wrap their head around?
I think if you come from Rome and you've been a big like double bracket person, I think you struggle to then be like, do I create this link here? Because I think in Tana most things are a thing that you then give a super tag. And so then I think that people struggle to be like, do I square bracket this? Do I reference it? Or do I make it a thing? Do I put it in a field? So there's a whole lot of I think structured data thinking that you're not used to in Rome, because you're used to just double bracket everything, put it somewhere, find it later. And so I think that's probably the biggest struggle for most people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you have a live search that shows you ideas at different stages of development?
I probably don't keep it necessarily like in a board like that. So I kind
Mm-hmm.
of keep it in my head, like I've got all of my content here. And
Mm-hmm.
then as I'm ready to work on it, I then change the status of this into what I call up next.
Mm-hmm.
And then that then goes into a different search, which is here in my up next board, where I can start to work on the idea. I have a look at kind of what I've done in my brain dump, and then I can kind of open it up and start to work on scripting, or if it's an article, work on the final article from the brain dump there. So I kind of probably work less in like a board type type view, and more kind of in context of what I'm trying to do at that time.
Okay. Yeah, that
That
makes
makes sense.
sense. Um,
Yeah. Like I
and
like to silo, if this makes sense, I like to silo my information. So
mhm,
because otherwise I get distracted, especially with ideas and kind of creating things. So if I am in kind of usually most mornings I'll be in my up next list, and I know this is the content I want to work on up next, and I can kind of go in and out of any of this content, but this is what I'm working on. And then on the weekends, if I want to kind of have a look at some of my ideas and think, oh, what should I move up next this week? I can be here and I can be doing that. So I try to silo things in so that I can get focus in that moment.
mhm, mhm. That makes sense.